The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its vaulted ceiling lost in artificial stars that mimicked the home worlds of 1,000 species. Ambassador Zeratil of the Celestial Dominion stood at the center podium, her crystalline form catching light from every angle as she addressed the assembled representatives. The war has consumed 17 systems. Her voice rang out, translated instantly into countless languages by the chamber's neural networks. The hegemony of Krell advances daily. Their bioships devour planets whole, leaving nothing but lifeless husks drifting in space. We have lost 12 billion souls in the past solar cycle alone. Murmurs rippled through the vast assembly. The insectoid Zephyrians clicked their mandibles nervously. The gaseous Nethrians flickered between translucent and opaque in their containment suits. Even the mighty Draknari, apex predators of the Outer Rim, showed signs of unease in their scaled features. Our combined fleets cannot match their adaptive technology, continued Zaratil. Every weapon we develop, they counter within days. Every strategy we employ, they anticipate and exploit. The Krell consciousness learns faster than we can evolve our tactics. The chamber fell silent. For 3 centuries, these species had ruled the galaxy through superior technology and ancient wisdom. The idea that they faced an enemy beyond their capabilities was almost incomprehensible. There is one option remaining, Zaratil said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. One species we have not yet approached for aid. Elder Vexhan of the Zephyrians rose from his seat, wings beating rapidly in agitation. Surely you do not speak of the humans, he chittered. Those primitive mammals barely mastered faster-than-light travel 50 rotations ago. They possess no advanced weapons, no psychic abilities, no technological superiority. Precisely, Zaratil replied. The Krell consciousness has studied our methods for millennia. It knows our patterns, our limitations, our very thoughts. But humans are chaos incarnate. Their minds work in ways that defy prediction. Even we cannot fully understand their thought processes. A deep rumble echoed from the Draknari section. War Chief Thaxon, his scarred hide bearing the marks of countless battles, fixed his predatory gaze on the ambassador. You would entrust the fate of the galaxy to a species that has existed for mere moments in cosmic time? Humans are violent, unpredictable, and driven by emotions rather than logic. They are more likely to make the situation worse than better. Their violence is precisely what we need, Zaratil countered. The Krell understands honor, strategy, and calculated aggression. They do not understand the human concept of spite, of fighting simply to prove a point, of refusing to surrender even when defeat is mathematically certain. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the podium. It showed grainy footage from human conflicts, primitive by galactic standards, but brutal in their intensity. Humans charging fortified positions with obsolete weapons. Humans detonating their own ships to damage enemies. Humans fighting hand-to-hand in the vacuum of space when their equipment failed. Look at their history, Zaratil said. They have fought wars for centuries using weapons that could barely penetrate their own atmosphere. Yet they never stopped innovating, never stopped adapting. When faced with extinction, they do not calculate odds or seek diplomatic solutions. They double down and fight harder. The display shifted to show recent human settlements on the galactic frontier. Ramshackle colonies that somehow thrived in conditions that would challenge advanced civilizations. Human traders who made profitable deals in markets where sophisticated algorithms failed. Human explorers who discovered new phenomena by ignoring safety protocols that had protected other species for millennia. Their unpredictability is their strength, Zaratil continued. The Krell consciousness cannot adapt to patterns it cannot comprehend. Human behavior often defies their own logic, let alone ours. Counselor Mortes of the Nethrian Collective pulsed with skeptical energy. Even if we accept this theory, how do we approach them? Humans are xenophobic by nature. They barely tolerate our presence in their territories, and Their governments are fragmented beyond reason. We choose carefully, Zaratiel replied. Not their leaders, who think in terms of politics and resources. Not their scientists, who might try to understand the Krell too thoroughly. We find someone unexpected. Someone the Krell could never anticipate. The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates argued that humanity was too primitive to contribute meaningfully. Others worried about the unpredictable consequences of involving such an unstable species. But as reports continued arriving of Krell advances, of more worlds consumed and more fleets destroyed, the arguments gradually shifted toward desperate acceptance. As the session concluded, Zaratiel stood alone at the podium, gazing up at the artificial stars. The fate of the galaxy now depended on finding the right human, someone who embodied all the chaos and determination that made their species both fascinating and terrifying. She had no idea that her choice would soon make the gods themselves take notice. The mining station on Kepler 442c barely deserved the name station. Built from salvaged freighter parts and held together by determination and improvised repairs, it clung to the asteroid's surface like a metal parasite. Inside the cramped quarters, Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he examined the failing atmospheric recycler for the third time that week. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, giving the ancient machine a practice kick that somehow made it come back to life. "Just hold together until the supply run." Jake was exactly the kind of human most galactic species couldn't understand. 34 years old, stubborn as a mule, and possessed of an engineering philosophy that involved hitting things until they worked. He'd been mining rare metals in the outer systems for 8 years, always alone, always making ends meet through sheer bloody-mindedness and creative problem-solving. His solitude was interrupted by an unexpected ping from the communications array. The signal was unlike anything in standard human transmissions, complex, layered, and somehow beautiful. Jake frowned at the display, wondering if his equipment was malfunctioning again. The transmission resolved into a holographic image of Zaratiel. Her crystalline form sparked with nervous energy as she spoke in careful, slightly accented English. "Human designated Jake Morrison, I am Ambassador Zaratiel of the Celestial Dominion. Your species knows of us through limited contact with your governments. I come to you with a request that may determine the survival of all sapient life in this galaxy." Jake stared at the hologram for a long moment, then took a sip of his coffee, a bitter brew made from recycled organics that would probably horrify civilized palates. "Lady, either I'm having another caffeine hallucination, or this is the weirdest sales pitch I've ever heard." Zaratiel's form flickered with what might have been surprise. "You are remarkably calm for someone experiencing first contact with an advanced alien civilization." "Advanced?" Jake gestured around his cramped quarters. "Honey, I've been living on recycled air and synthetic protein for the past 3 months because my supply shipment got delayed. Yesterday, I fixed my gravity generator with duct tape and prayer. Trust me, anything that can actually transmit clear video across interstellar space already has my attention." The ambassador paused, consulting some unseen data. "According to our intelligence, you are considered eccentric even by human standards. You have no family, few social connections, and a documented history of unconventional problem solving." "Unconventional?" Jake snorted. "That's a polite way of saying I got kicked out of 3 engineering programs for insufficient respect for established methodology. But my stuff works, which is more than I can say for most textbook solutions." "This is precisely why you were chosen," Zaratiel said, her voice gaining intensity. "We face an enemy called the hegemony of Krell. They are a collective consciousness that learns from every encounter, adapts to every strategy, and has systematically defeated every advanced civilization in their path." Jake listened as she explained the war, the desperate situation, and the theory that human unpredictability might be the key to victory. As she spoke, his expression grew more thoughtful, though he continued making minor adjustments to his equipment. "So let me get this straight," he said when she finished. You've got this big bad enemy that's too smart for its own good, and you think throwing humans at it might work because we're too stupid to fight properly. Not stupid, Zaratil corrected quickly. Chaotic, unpredictable. Human tactical thinking follows patterns that even we cannot fully comprehend, let alone predict. Jake was quiet for several minutes, apparently absorbed in rewiring a control panel. Finally, he looked up. You know what this reminds me of? There was this chess program back on Earth, years ago. Unbeatable. Could calculate millions of moves ahead, had every opening memorized, knew every possible strategy. Then, some kid beat it by making moves that made no logical sense. The program couldn't adapt because it kept trying to find the logic behind illogical choices. An apt analogy, Zaratil agreed. Will you help us? Help you do what exactly? I'm one guy with a mining rig and a talent for jury-rigging broken equipment. I'm not exactly general material. We do not need a general. We need someone who thinks differently. Someone who can look at an impossible situation and find a solution that no one else would consider. Jake stood up and walked to the small viewport that showed the asteroid field stretching into infinity. Thousands of rocks tumbling through space, each one a potential hazard or opportunity, depending on how you looked at it. You know, I came out here to get away from people telling me the right way to do things, he said. Every job I ever had, there was always some supervisor explaining why my methods wouldn't work, right up until they did work better than anything in the manual. He turned back to face the hologram. I've got one condition. I don't take orders from committees or councils or any kind of bureaucracy. If I'm going to help you fight this thing, I do it my way with my rules, using my methods. Even if they seem crazy. Especially if they seem crazy, Zaratil replied. That is exactly what we need. Then, you've got yourself a human, Jake said, already mentally cataloging what he'd need to shut down the mining operation. But I'm warning you now, my way of doing things tend to make everyone involved very nervous, including me. As the transmission ended and Jake began preparing for departure, neither of them realized that their conversation had been monitored by entities far older and more powerful than the Galactic Council. In dimensions beyond normal space, ancient minds stirred with interest and alarm. The game was about to change in ways that no one could predict. 7, the Celestial Dominion's flagship harmonious purpose, was a marvel of crystalline engineering. Its organic curves and flowing passages designed to inspire contemplation and peace. Jake Morrison looked profoundly out of place as he walked through its corridors, his worn work clothes and tool-laden belt contrasting sharply with the ship's ethereal beauty. Your accommodations are through here, Zaratil said, gesturing toward a chamber that seemed to grow from the ship's walls like a natural crystal formation. The environmental controls can be adjusted for human comfort parameters. Jake poked his head inside and immediately bumped it on a hanging crystal formation. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. You got anything more rectangular? 3 days into their journey to the front lines, the ship's senior staff had gathered in the central planning chamber to brief Jake on the tactical situation. The room was filled with holographic displays showing fleet positions, Krell advance patterns, and mathematical projections of probable outcomes. Every chart painted the same picture: inevitable defeat. War Chief Faxon's scarred form dominated one side of the chamber. The Krell bio ships adapt to our weapons within hours of first contact, he growled. Our energy cannons become useless. Our kinetic projectiles are absorbed and converted. Even our psychic attacks are neutralized once they analyze the patterns. They're learning machines, added Chief Strategist Mordaunt, her tentacles weaving complex equations in the air. Each engagement makes them stronger while weakening us. The mathematical progression indicates total defeat within 18 standard cycles. Jake studied the displays while munching on what the ship's food processors had optimistically labeled a human nutrition bar. It tasted like cardboard flavored with sadness. So you always fight them the same way? He asked around a mouthful of artificial protein. We employ the most efficient tactics available, Mordaunt replied stiffly. Our strategies are based on mathematical optimization, and millennia of proven battlefield experience. And they learn from every single engagement. Precisely. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Back home, we had a saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over while expecting different results. The assembled officers exchanged glances. Faxon's claws extended slightly. Are you implying that our tactical doctrine is insane? I'm saying maybe that's exactly what we need. Jake stood up and walked to the main tactical display. You're fighting a thinking enemy with thinking tactics. Every move you make is logical, which means it's predictable. What happens if you do something completely stupid instead? Zaratil leaned forward, her crystalline form catching the light from the displays. Elaborate. Well, let's say you're facing a Krell bio ship that's adapted to your energy weapons. Standard doctrine says you retreat, regroup, and try a different energy frequency, right? Of course, Mordon agreed. Tactical withdrawal to preserve forces while developing countermeasures. What if instead you ram it? The chamber fell silent. Faxon's predatory eyes fixed on Jake with new intensity. Ramming attacks sacrifice ships for minimal damage. The mathematics of attrition dash. The mathematics assume both sides are trying to win efficiently. Jake interrupted. But what if winning efficiently isn't the point? What if the point is to be so aggressively stupid that the enemy can't predict what you'll do next? He manipulated the holographic display, creating a crude simulation. Look, your bioships are designed to learn and adapt, right? They probably have some kind of threat assessment protocol. When they see an enemy ship approaching, they calculate the most likely attack patterns and prepare countermeasures. The display showed a typical Krell bio ship, its organic hull bristling with adaptive weapons. But what happens when they detect an approaching ship that's not slowing down, not charging weapons, not doing anything that makes tactical sense? Their learning algorithms probably don't have a template for enemy commander has completely lost his mind. Mordon's tentacles writhed in agitation. Even if such a tactic succeeded once, the Krell would adapt. They would develop countermeasures for ramming attacks. Sure, but then you do something else equally stupid. Maybe you broadcast human music at them. Maybe you paint your ships bright pink. Maybe you start every battle by launching escape pods full of rubber duckies. Jake grinned at their horrified expressions. The key is to never establish a pattern they can learn from. This is madness, Faxon rumbled. Exactly. That's the point. You can't outthink an enemy that thinks faster than you. But you can out-crazy them, because crazy doesn't follow rules they can analyze. Zaratil studied the tactical displays with new eyes. Our intelligence indicates that Krell bio ships have highly sophisticated prediction algorithms. They calculate thousands of possible threat scenarios in microseconds. Right, but all those calculations assume rational behavior. What if we're not rational? The ambassador's form flickered with sudden understanding. The Krell consciousness is based on logical optimization. They seek the most efficient path to victory in every situation. If we deliberately choose inefficient, illogical paths, they'll be fighting an enemy they can't comprehend. Jake finished. And while they're trying to figure out why we're doing something incredibly stupid, we might just get lucky and win. Admiral Koth, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. His ancient voice carried the weight of countless battles. In my experience, young human battles are won through superior planning, not random chance. Jake shrugged. Maybe, but right now, superior planning is getting your fleets wiped out. Sometimes you have to roll the dice. The chamber erupted in debate as the various officers argued the merits and dangers of abandoning established doctrine. But in the depths of space, sensors designed to monitor dimensional boundaries began registering anomalous readings. Ancient entities, older than the Galactic Council, older than the Krell themselves, had begun to take notice of the small human who spoke of chaos as strategy. These beings, who had watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a cosmic shore, found themselves intrigued by something they had not encountered in eons: genuine unpredictability. The gods, it seemed, were curious about Jake Morrison. And when gods become curious about mortals, the universe itself begins to change in ways that no amount of logical planning can anticipate. The Battle of Nexus Prime began exactly as every previous engagement with the Krell had begun, with mathematical precision and inevitable defeat. 36 Galactic Council ships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their energy signatures masked, their weapons optimized for maximum efficiency. The Krell bioship Endless Consumption emerged from hyperspace like a living nightmare, its organic hull pulsing with adaptive technologies that had devoured 17 star systems. Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of a modified mining vessel he'd renamed Spite, watching the tactical displays with the calm attention of someone about to do something monumentally stupid. All ships, this is Admiral Koth, came the transmission from the flagship. Implement battle plan Zeta-7. Target the bioship's primary consciousness nodes with focused energy bursts. Jake watched as the Council fleet executed their plan with flawless coordination. Energy beams lanced through space, striking the Krell ship with devastating precision. For approximately 37 seconds, it looked like the attack might actually work. Then, the bioship's hull began to shift, developing reflective surfaces that turned the energy weapons back on their attackers. Adaptive armor plates emerged to absorb kinetic impacts. The Krell consciousness had learned, analyzed, and countered every strategy in the Council's playbook. All ships, retreat to fallback position Beta. Admiral Koth ordered as his forces began taking casualties. Prepare for tactical withdrawal. Spite to all ships. Jake's voice cut across the communications channel. I'm going in. Negative, Human Morrison, Admiral Koth replied sharply. Maintain formation and follow retreat protocols. Yeah, about that, Jake said, pushing his engines to full power and heading straight for the bioship. I don't really do protocols. The Spite was not an impressive vessel by any standard. Cobbled together from mining equipment and held together by human stubbornness, it looked more like a flying scrapyard than a warship. Its only weapons were industrial cutting lasers and a cargo hold full of mining charges. As Jake approached the Krell bioship, he could almost feel its consciousness analyzing his vessel, calculating threat levels, preparing countermeasures. The alien ship's weapons systems swiveled to track his approach, but they seemed confused by the Spite's complete lack of military equipment. Come on, you oversized space squid, Jake muttered, flipping switches in a sequence that would have horrified any safety inspector. Let's see how you handle some good old-fashioned human stupidity. Instead of firing weapons or attempting evasive maneuvers, Jake did something that violated every principle of space combat. He opened his cargo bay and started dumping mining charges into space. Not in any tactical pattern, not aimed at anything specific, just scattered randomly around the battlefield like cosmic garbage. The Krell consciousness struggled to comprehend this action. Mining charges were not weapons in any meaningful sense. They were industrial tools designed to break apart asteroids. Their random distribution served no strategic purpose. Every algorithm the bioship ran came up with the same conclusion. This behavior made no logical sense. While the alien consciousness was still processing this tactical impossibility, Jake activated his mining lasers. But instead of targeting the bioship, he started shooting the floating mining charges he'd just scattered, detonating them in random sequence. The explosions were small by space combat standards, but their chaotic timing and placement created something unprecedented, a completely unpredictable battlefield. Debris flew in every direction. Energy discharges flickered randomly through space. The normal laws of combat geometry ceased to apply. What is the human doing? Demanded War Chief Thaxon from his ship. I have no idea, Admiral Koth admitted. His actions appear to serve no tactical purpose whatsoever. The Krell bioship attempted to adapt to this new threat environment, but found itself unable to establish meaningful patterns. Every prediction algorithm failed because there was no logic to predict. The alien consciousness, for the first time in its existence, experienced something approaching confusion. Jake took advantage of this confusion to ram the spite directly into the bioship's hull. Not at a critical system or weapon emplacement, but at what appeared to be the most structurally sound section. The impact should have accomplished nothing except destroying Jake's ship. Instead, it triggered a cascade failure throughout the bioship's adaptive systems. The Krell consciousness had been so focused on analyzing Jake's incomprehensible tactics that it had neglected basic defensive protocols. The ramming attack, which should have been easily absorbed, instead caused critical damage to systems that had been reconfigured to counter threats that never materialized. All ships attack now. Jake's voice crackled over the communications as his ship's hull began to buckle. Hit them while they're confused. The Council fleet, trained for millennia in tactical precision, struggled to adapt to the chaotic battlefield Jake had created. But Admiral Koth, veteran of countless campaigns, recognized opportunity when he saw it. All ships, abandon formation, he ordered. Attack at will. Maximum aggression, minimal coordination. For the first time in the war, Galactic Council forces achieved tactical surprise against a Krell bioship. Their scattered, uncoordinated attacks struck systems that were still trying to adapt to Jake's impossible strategy. Energy beams found targets that hadn't developed proper defenses. Kinetic projectiles penetrated armor that was configured for entirely different threats. The bioship Endless Consumption died not from superior firepower or advanced tactics, but from sheer bewilderment. Its final transmissions were fragments of code that roughly translated to what just happened. As rescue shuttles pulled Jake from his damaged ship, sensor arrays throughout the galaxy detected something extraordinary. Dimensional barriers were fluctuating. Ancient monitoring stations, dormant for eons, suddenly came online. In the spaces between realities, entities of unimaginable power stirred from cosmic slumber. The gods had been watching, and they were impressed. Human Morrison, came a voice that seemed to speak from the fabric of space itself. It was accompanied by a presence that made Admiral Koth's ancient wisdom feel like a child's understanding. You have done something unprecedented. You have introduced true chaos into a deterministic system. Jake, still strapped to a medical gurney and tasting blood, managed to croak out a response. Was that good or bad? Because right now, I can't tell the difference. That uncertainty, the cosmic voice replied with something that might have been amusement, is precisely what makes you so dangerous. The Battle of Nexus Prime had ended in victory, but it had also attracted the attention of beings who had not interfered in galactic affairs for millions of years. The universe itself had taken notice of Jake Morrison, and that attention would change everything. The medical bay of the Harmonious Purpose had been reconfigured 3 times to accommodate Jake Morrison's recovery, each attempt failing to account for his tendency to modify the equipment. When Zartiel found him, he was sitting up in bed, somehow having converted the diagnostic scanner into a device that brewed coffee. The doctors say you have 17 broken bones, internal bleeding, and severe radiation exposure, she said, her crystalline form flickering with concern. Yet you appear to be tinkering. Coffee machine was broken, Jake explained, offering her a steaming mug. Well, it wasn't actually a coffee machine, but it is now. Before she could respond, the medical bay filled with a presence that made the air itself seem heavy with significance. The walls shimmered, and suddenly they were no longer alone. 3 entities materialized around Jake's bed, each one representing forces that had shaped the universe since its birth. The first appeared as shifting geometric patterns of pure light, its voice resonating like the birth of stars. I am the architect who designs the laws that govern reality. The second manifested as flowing darkness shot through with silver threads, speaking with the whisper of entropy itself. I am the weaver, who maintains the balance between order and chaos. The third took the form of swirling galaxies in constant motion, its words carrying the weight of infinite possibility. I am the dreamer, who imagines what could be beyond what is. Jake took a sip of his improvised coffee and nodded politely. Nice to meet you. I'm Jake. I assume this is about the whole blowing up the space squid thing. Zaratiel's form had frozen completely, overwhelmed by the presence of beings that existed beyond normal space and time. These were the gods whose existence was whispered about in the most ancient texts, entities that had not directly communicated with mortals for eons. Human Morrison, the architect, began, "Your actions have introduced variables into our carefully balanced equation. The Krell were designed to be the ultimate test of logical civilizations. They represent perfect adaptation, inevitable progress through calculated evolution. And you ruined it," the Weaver added, though there was something like approval in its voice. "Your chaotic methodology broke patterns that were meant to be unbreakable. You achieved victory through means that our calculations could not predict." Jake shrugged, wincing slightly as the motion aggravated his injuries. "Yeah, well, sometimes the best solution is the one nobody expects, including yourself." The dreamer pulsed with colors that had no names. "This is why we have come. Your species represents something we have never encountered. Genuine unpredictability within a framework of determination. You plan carefully, then throw your plans away at the crucial moment. We call it winging it," Jake said helpfully. "The Krell consciousness has been traumatized by its encounter with your methods," the architect continued. "Its collective mind cannot process the concept of purposeful logic. The entire hegemony has ceased expansion while their consciousness attempts to understand what happened at Nexus Prime." Zaratiel finally found her voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper. "The war, is it over?" "The current phase, yes," the Weaver replied. "But the Krell will adapt. They always do. They will eventually develop new parameters that account for irrational behavior." "Probably," Jake agreed. "But by then, we'll have come up with something even more stupid to confuse them with. That's kind of our specialty." The three cosmic entities exchanged communications that existed beyond normal perception, having conversations in dimensions that mortal minds couldn't comprehend. Finally, the dreamer addressed Jake directly. "We offer you a choice, human. We can enhance your capabilities, grant you powers that would make you a match for any threat in this galaxy. You could become a cosmic force, a being capable of reshaping reality itself." Jake considered this while taking another sip of coffee. "That's a generous offer, but I'm going to pass." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ship's life support systems seemed to pause. "You refuse?" the architect asked, its voice carrying genuine bewilderment. "See, here's the thing," Jake explained, gesturing with his coffee mug. "The moment I become some kind of cosmic super being, I stop being unpredictable. I start thinking like a god instead of like a stubborn human who doesn't know when to quit. And then I'm just another logical actor in your equation." The Weaver's form rippled with what might have been laughter. "You understand the paradox. To maintain the chaos that makes you effective, you must remain fundamentally unchanged. Plus," Jake added, "I like being human. We're a mess, but we're an interesting mess. And apparently, that's exactly what the universe needs right now." The three entities began to fade, their purpose apparently fulfilled. But the dreamer paused before departing. "The Krell will return, human Morrison. They will adapt to chaos itself, develop new strategies that account for irrationality." "What will you do then?" Jake grinned, the expression somehow managing to be both confident and slightly unhinged. "Same thing we always do when faced with impossible odds. Something incredibly stupid that somehow works anyway." As the gods departed, leaving only their lingering presence in the air like the memory of distant thunder, Zaratiel stared at Jake with new understanding. "You turned down the power of the gods themselves," she said. "Had to," Jake replied, already turning his attention back to improving the coffee machine. "The moment you start thinking you're special, you stop doing the impossible. And humanity's greatest strength has always been our stubborn refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible." Throughout the galaxy, the news spread quickly. The Krell had been defeated by a human in a mining ship who had treated the laws of space combat like suggestions. The war was not over, but for the first time in generations, victory seemed possible. The gods returned to their cosmic observations, but now they watched humanity with new interest. A species that could refuse divine power in order to remain authentically chaotic was worth watching indeed. And Jake Morrison went back to drinking his improvised coffee and planning his next impossible solution to an unsolvable problem, blissfully unaware that his name had become legend throughout the galaxy and a source of fascination to beings older than the stars themselves. Sometimes the universe needed heroes. Sometimes it needed wisdom. But occasionally, it needed someone stubborn enough to succeed through sheer bloody-mindedness and a complete inability to accept defeat. Humanity, it turned out, specialized in that last category.